10K! What's up everyone, Austin here, and yeah, I just hit 10,000 subscribers, so thanks guys. Anyways, today I'm here with my review of the Samsung Galaxy S5, and it's been about 2.5 months since its initial release, so I've had quite a bit of time to mess around with it. As usual, this is not going to be a largely in-depth review. In fact, I'm sure most of you guys have seen the more in-depth reviews early in the release, but this is mostly just my thoughts after having the opportunity to play with it for a while. So with all that said, let's jump right into it. So as you know, this is Samsung's latest flagship, and at this point it's being compared to the HTC One M8 and soon the LG G3, which is arguably the best of the three. Again, I haven't had the chance to really mess around with the G3, but I have had the opportunity to mess around with the HTC One M8. Actually, I did a review of that phone, so if you want to check that out, that'll be in the description. So I'm going to be comparing it to the HTC One M8, and right off the bat, the first thing that I really noticed was just the lack of creativity in terms of the upgrade from the previous model. Now you can say the same thing about the original HTC One versus the M8, but really HTC had less work cut out for them due to the success and the great design of the M7. So overall, I wasn't very ecstatic about this phone when it was being released. So this is the S4 and this is the S5. Not much of a difference. In fact, I actually like the design of the S4 better. It's not as boxy as the S5, it's not as boring. Of course, they did try and spice things up by adding some new hardware like the heart rate sensor, which is barely worth mentioning, and the fingerprint sensor, which I'll get to in a minute. But overall, the new design was really just uninspired. There's that familiar chrome trim on the edges and a soft touch plastic battery cover, which isn't too bad, but I wouldn't have been off-put if they decided to use more premium materials or even considered front-facing speakers. One useful addition, however, is the waterproofing that was not present on the S4. If you take off the back cover, you can see that the battery and the internals are completely sealed off with this rubber trim going around the back cover. Also on the bottom there is a flap over the micro USB charging port, and this allows the phone to actually be water resistant. Now I'm not telling you to go ahead and dunk your phone in water to go prove that it works, but it can withstand water pressure when it's submerged at about 1 meter in water. It can basically withstand any realistic situation, so if any liquid happened to pour on it, you shouldn't be too worried. On the front, there's a pretty high quality 5.1-inch 1080p display, and it's not as oversaturated as their other phones, and I actually really like it this way. It's still really vibrant and has really great viewing angles. Also, the bezels aren't too big, so the display actually takes up most of the screen, and it's a pretty comfortable size for the hand, and it's definitely not as tall as the HTC One M8. Right below the display are two capacitive buttons, with the menu button now being replaced with a recent apps button and a home button which now doubles as a fingerprint sensor. Okay, now remember when I said the phone was comfortable to hold in the hand? Well, I lied. Now they didn't really take into the design, at least I'm not assuming so, they didn't really take into the size of the phone when they were designing the fingerprint sensor. Their sensor requires you to swipe directly down, which is really uncomfortable and pretty much impossible to do with one hand. Now don't get me wrong, the sensor's not bad. In fact, it works about 80% of the time, but don't expect to use it without moving your hand down the phone or just using your other hand to swipe down. Also, there's something really weird that I noticed. So after a certain amount of fingerprint failures, it's gonna prompt you to enter a passcode, right? Well, the thing is, if I get that wrong, I can just turn off the phone and it'll prompt me for the fingerprint again. I'm not sure if this is a huge security flaw, but it doesn't really make sense when it says max attempts have been reached, but then it allows you to go right back and start entering your fingerprint again. It doesn't lock me out or anything, so I'm not sure if this is just a huge mistake on Samsung's part, or if I don't know what's going on here. On the back, there's a 16 megapixel camera, and long story short, it takes really good photos. You'll be sure to get some really awesome shots when you're outside and the sun is out. Although it doesn't have a depth sensor like the M8, it is 16 megapixels as opposed to 4, so there's a pretty good level of detail when you zoom in on the photo. It should be mentioned though that the S5's camera really struggles in low light performance, at least in my experience, and the same can be said for the 2 megapixel shooter on the front. Now one upside to the rear camera is it actually does record in 4K. Obviously this video is only in 1080p because I don't have 4K equipment, but you can downscale the 4K videos in order to get sharper videos from the S5. Okay, so here's the part that I've been dreading. TouchWiz. Now, I've never really disliked TouchWiz that much over other skins, but there were just some things that don't feel right and kind of annoy me. So luckily we've gotten to the point where the specs don't matter as much. Chances are if you buy a flagship, it's going to perform like a flagship, and that's mostly true for the S5, but there are some quirks. So once you turn on the phone and get past the lock screen, you're greeted with the familiar TouchWiz interface. A couple swipes across the home screens and you'll see some typical Samsung stuff like S Fit and Galaxy Essentials. If you swipe to the left home screen, just like in Sense, you'll see a custom version of Flipboard in the form of My Magazine. If you pull down the notification tray, again, you'll see a very Samsung-esque TouchWiz theme going on. Going into the settings, there are a bunch of these circle icons for every task you would need to do. I'm not sure what it is, but I just don't like it. It may sound weird, but I feel like the settings menu is one place where the UI should actually be a bit more sophisticated, and it's just not. It's a lot to get into, but there are just a bunch of small quirks that really annoy me. For example, the recent apps menu. It's all just really unpolished, and frankly, that's just the overall theme of TouchWiz, and it's just not my cup of tea. So that is the Samsung Galaxy S5. It's definitely not a bad phone by any means, but comparing it to its competitors and even its predecessors, it's just not that impressive. With that said, I am interested in seeing how the Google Play Edition is received whenever that comes out. So that is my review. Be sure to hit up that thumbs button if you like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I still can't believe there's 10,000 of you guys, but anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.